I think we're about to start. So we have 4 seats up front. Oh, looks like one is taken. 3 seats up front. And we'll put a few more seats in a minute. My name is Vera. I'm organizing DC Microfinance Meetup. Thanks, everyone, for coming. First thing, several people asked about this space. We're actually partnering with 1776 DC. It's a startup incubator. They have startups that work in education, transportation, healthcare, and there are about 200 startups working from here right now. So I thought, as microfinance is now tapping into all these fields, it's a great place to think about innovation and new tendencies in financial inclusion. So today we have a fireside chat with Ben Powell and Katie Torrington. I'll say a few things about them. Ben is the founder and CEO of Agora Partnerships. It's an early-stage accelerator program, and they work primarily in Latin America, with actually some of the most poor countries. And I think it's a wonderful job they're doing. They're helping people who have startups or companies that are a little bit above microfinance, but definitely not big enough to be interested in financial services and regular banks. Some of things about Ben. Before Agora Partnerships, he worked as Presidential Management Fellow at the Office of the Management and Budget. Has been named a Draper Richards Kaplan Foundation Entrepreneur, a BMW Foundation Young Leader, and a Ashoka Fellow. He's also one of the top 40 under 40 development leaders in Washington, D.C. Thanks for coming. And Katie now works as a Senior Manager of Special Projects at FINCA International. Used to be my colleague. She leads critical new business projects with an emphasis on introducing non-financial services. So this is something interesting for her. She's not just doing microlending. Most people think microlending is all microfinance is about. Not anymore. She's also oversees FINCA's participation in Social Performance Task Force and on the board of directors of Women Advancing Microfinance. So thanks for coming, and I'll just give it to you.
Technology, not the division I'm a part of. Thanks very, very much, Vera, for the space and the introduction. I'm really pleased to be speaking with Ben Powell today. And I think we'll probably just jump in since we have a pretty compressed time frame and to leave time for the audience to ask a few questions. So first off, you've said that business must help move society forward. And would love to hear sort of how this philosophy underpins Agora's work, maybe an example or two.
Sure. Well, maybe I can just tell a quick story. When I was in my late 20s, I had the idea, I was trying to figure out what to do with my life, and I had the idea of opening up a miniature golf course in Mexico. And so I did that with a friend of mine. And I was in Puebla, Mexico. And then I went back to the States. I got a master's degree. I started working at the Office of Management and Budget at the White House. And I would always go back to Mexico, on vacation days to see how the business was doing. And one day, I got back, and I go into the main room, and there's this electricity in the air, and you can just feel that something's going on. And our manager rushed up to me and said, "Hey, Ben, have you heard the news?" And I said, what's going on? And he said, well, Maribel, and Maribel was our cashier. It's like, Maribel just got a loan to buy a small apartment. And now Maribel was a single mother. She had never had a job in the formal economy before we had created this miniature golf course in Mexico. And our manager opened up a bank account for her. And she established a credit history, and lo and behold, a couple of years later, she's eligible for a government loan. And I felt at that moment that I was actually making more of a difference in the world in a way that was meaningful to me, with this sort of dinky little miniature golf course in Mexico. And it really made me think, what am I doing with my life? And the point of that story is that we have so many challenges and problems, and we kind of all know, we almost take it as a given now that government and charity alone is not going to fix it. Business is going to have to fix it, but we're going to have to also fix business if business is going to fix it. So we're going to have to change and shift our attitudes around what a successful business means, what a truly great entrepreneur is. What does leadership mean in this context of lots of challenges and still having the business unit as probably the most efficient, dynamic, organizational unit that we've created to get stuff done. And so if we can channel and harness that energy of business into creating shared value for everybody, if that becomes the norm, I think that is probably the best shot we have at kind of supporting and accelerating the innovation that we need, to move the whole planet forward. So that's why we're very focused on working with for-profit businesses only, because they have that dynamism and they also can scale much faster than a nonprofit ever could.
And so maybe just building on that point around the idea of the community and businesses that give something back, a level of social responsibility being perhaps one of the criteria that you would look for, and maybe tell us a bit about the entrepreneurs that are part of your network.
Sure. So we, like Vera said in the introduction, we work with entrepreneurs who are early stage. And the average entrepreneur in our program has revenue of about $150,000, $200,000. Some have more. So we don't really work with pure startups. We're looking to work with companies that are post proof of concept, that have revenue, that have employees, and where the entrepreneur is fully invested in the venture. As many of you know, if you don't have collateral and you don't have connections, how are you going to get the growth capital you need to power your business? Very, very difficult, and it's a huge constraint. So that's the kind of level of business that we work with, and then we have 3 criteria when we select entrepreneurs for our program. First, we look at the individual. By far, that's the most important criteria. And we look at 2 things primarily. Number 1, do they have real entrepreneurial potential, right? That's the most important thing. Secondly, we look at their intentionality. And that is really important to us because we're trying to create a values-based community of entrepreneurs who are trying to create shared value with their business. And what we found, and it was almost shocking, is how hungry, especially in Latin America, entrepreneurs are to find that community. Because oftentimes people think they're crazy, their parents think they're crazy, but when they meet other like-minded entrepreneurs, and when they are also in a community that says you can turn this into a competitive advantage, like solving a major social problem should result in growth, in sales, right? And so we help them to sort of think about impact in a maybe more sophisticated way than they were able to before. But we really look for that intentionality. Then we look for a strong business model. I mean, if you're just trying to start a barber shop and that's your ambition in life, that's awesome. But it's probably not worth, the level of resources that we will put into you. We put in about $20,000 worth of resources. That's what it costs us to accelerate an entrepreneur. We charge the entrepreneurs, but we don't charge them $20K because no one can afford that. So we get funders and others to help subsidize that work to them. And then the last thing we look for in the entrepreneurs is if they're successful, what does the social impact look like? So if you want to create a new model to franchise barbershops and create lots of jobs and that's interesting to us. But we do look at our criteria in that order. And I think when we started, the tendency was to kind of look for the social impact first and the person last. And I think that is still, done, way too much with aid programs and development programs. But, for us, we believe that the basic unit that matters is the entrepreneur and his or her management team. And so a lot of what we do is help that person to grow, to learn, to develop self-mastery, to, better understand their business plan and business model, and then connect them with mentors and connect them with ultimately matched investors that want to support them.
Technology. It seems like, too, you mentioned impact and messaging around social impact, measurement. Is that, I would imagine that applies at several levels within the organization, both on the investment side and also at the direct entrepreneur side, as you said. Are there any international standards or measures that you're partial to?
So we in the early days, we created our own standards, which is like kind of very frustrating process. So the second, we were actually, we back in like 2007, when B Corporation was launching, and they were thinking about, gosh, at some point we want to expand globally. So we went to them with a team from Columbia Business School, and we said, hey, let's prototype what the B assessment would look like in the developing world. And so we created this prototype, which then Monitor took over, and it became what's now known as GEARS, Global Impact Investment Rating System. And so we certify every company that goes through our program through GEARS, and I think we're the biggest certifier in Latin America. And so that's one way that we look at it, but that's limited as well. It's just a snapshot. All of our companies have to have performance metrics that are IRIS compliant. IRIS is another kind of accounting methodology, so you can compare a job here to a job there, and so we use that as well. But every time we try to impose this on an entrepreneur, we really make sure that it makes sense for the entrepreneur. Like if we're just imposing it, and if the entrepreneur is doing it because they think they have to go through this hoop to get investment, then it kind of defeats the entire purpose. Because to me, the purpose of these standards is not, there's one purpose, which is to make it easy for investors to invest at scale. But I think the real purpose is to get entrepreneurs to make better managerial decisions so that they're managing towards impact. Because at the end of the day, it's the day-to-day decisions that the entrepreneurs make that will, determine whether the impact investing kind of fad is a fad or if it's really something that will change the world. And that's a huge open question right now.
And I think that probably helps to make something that can oftentimes be very intangible, quite tangible and easy to compare across entrepreneur or across country. And I think with that sort of would be great to talk specifically about women and the Accelerate Women Now initiative of Agora and why that was important, why now,
Yep.
And some of the early results recent results, I should say, that you've seen.
Yeah, sure. So we realized that, probably the biggest single lever of development is raising the power and status of women. You do that, and all kinds of really good things happen. And this is, proven over and over again. It's also proven that the more women you have in leadership positions, the more women you have on your board, that correlates favorably with economic returns, with growth. So it's kind of a no-brainer. The challenge for us was that it was hard for us to identify the really high-growth women entrepreneurs in Latin America. Now, we knew they were there, but they weren't as kind of aggressive. They weren't finding us. And so we realized that if we were going to reach out, we needed to kind of do something different. So we created a campaign called Accelerate Women Now. And it's really a fundraising campaign, but what it has enabled us to do is to devote more resources to build partnerships with organizations that work with women in Latin America, to create relationships with funders that are creating scholarships for women entrepreneurs in our program. It's allowed us to think about how do we use a gender lens in thinking about impact portfolios that we're creating, because what we want to do eventually is not just sort of help an individual company connect with an individual investor, which is great, but that's just the beginning, and it's not particularly scalable. We want to be able to kind of create kind of portfolios of entrepreneurs that you can then go and take to investors, so an investor can invest in a whole portfolio. And we created we piloted a fund with a foundation, the Ilios Foundation, called the Agora Ilios Latin American Women's Fund. And the idea of that fund is really to be identifying high-growth women-owned companies in Latin America, and then using this really interesting new, it's called the demand dividend, and it's a financing structure that basically allows the entrepreneur to pay back based on their free cash flow up to a certain point. And so if it functions a little bit like quasi-equity. So if the company is doing really well, you as an investor can really get some of that upside. And if the company is struggling, you're not going to starve the company to death. And we piloted that with an incredible entrepreneur named Emily Stone. She has a company called Maya Mountain Cacao. And actually, she studied just up the street here at Georgetown. And what she's done is she controls now about 90% of the cacao industry in Belize. Very simply, she got some chocolate producers that wanted high-end, organic, high-quality chocolate, and they wanted to make sure that the farmers were getting as much resources as they could. And so she delivers an incredible product, great customer service at a major premium to her main competition in Belize, which is the Fair Trade Association. And she's doing a great job, and the market is speaking. And so because of this company, these smallholder farmers are saving time and money. And we were able to get about 20 investors with the Ilios Foundation to invest in a $200,000 note, to help her grow. And so there are these, this is just one example, and it's not like there are that many other examples. We're kind of at the beginning, right? There's so much to learn, but we feel like there's a tremendous amount of investors out there who are willing to take a risk on a company that, if successful, is going to make a huge difference in the community.
I know you said that it was just maybe the first and best example, but I would expect that there are several more in the pipeline. It's such a fantastic initiative. In terms of, or campaign rather, what else is on the horizon? New countries, new campaigns, new targeted demographics. I'm sure there are several potential folks in the audience who are interested.
Yeah, sure. So we're, the way our model works, we have a cohort of kind of between 20 and 30 companies a year. This year we have 22 companies from 14 countries throughout Latin America. A number of those entrepreneurs are actually American. They're actually, these shoes, this is a great company if you're in the market for an incredibly sustainable, great shoe that just pays their workers really well and treats them really well. This is a company called Nisolo. They're based in Nashville, but their main production facility is in Peru. And they make fantastic shoes, and they're reviving a whole shoe industry that was kind of, dwindling. So there are American entrepreneurs as well in our program. But our strategy right now is to, instead of trying to just scale, which is what everyone wants you to do right away. We're trying to focus more on the business model and the craftsmanship of the business model, and there's a lot of moving pieces, right? We have a fellowship program. We bring in these really amazing, usually post-MBA fellows. They each work with 3 to 4 companies. We want to continue to invest in that program, make that really a premier program, because it gives it gives you an incredible opportunity to work with entrepreneurs and to get your feet wet. And it's incredibly challenging as well. I mean, it's not for the faint of heart. We have a mentor network we're developing. We have an investor network that we're trying to figure out how to better monetize. So a lot of what we're struggling with now is like, what is that perfect business model for an accelerator that does not take equity and that is focused really on unleashing the potential of entrepreneurs. So most accelerators, ultimately they have investors, and they, when everything works perfectly, investor and entrepreneur interests are aligned, but that's not always the case. So for us, we take fees, but we're not trying to take equity. We're thinking about maybe taking warrants or something like that. But we want to build a brand as an organization that is very entrepreneur-friendly, and where if you have a company that's going to create real value to society, and that's important to you, and you want to find impact investors who value that you can come to us, and we can kind of help you do that. And I should have mentioned when we started the Accelerate Women Now campaign, we had about 22% of our program was women, and now it's about 50%. And it's just about that focus. So we're really excited about that. We think it actually helps everybody when you have diversity. And it's not just gender diversity. We also are trying to ensure that you have diversity of kind of socioeconomic background. There's a lot of incredible indigenous entrepreneurs that no one even thinks of. And we are working to try to create a class that's kind of balanced and diverse. And we found that the entrepreneurs love this because they don't often get to meet with people that are from a different class or region. And they learn so much from each other. So that's another big piece of kind of our theory of change.
And I think that's a very unique perspective. That's not something that I feel many would have heard. It's usually scale, 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 and less about sort of strategic and inclusive growth. So I hope we'll have a few questions about that as we move into Q&A. Just to finish up our chat, what advice might you have for would-be participants, contributors to the work that you're doing, or who are maybe more on the entrepreneur or startup side, considering you've seen both?
Sure. So our office is right next door. We're at the OpenGov Hub. We just moved there. It's a really great, similarly great co-working space. And we want to be doing events and stuff there too. So hopefully you can come to some of those events. We have entrepreneurs who come in and out of DC. And if you're interested in learning more about us, please check out our website, agorapartnerships.org. We will have a brand new website in a couple of months. So our website's in that sort of, it's kind of rusty, and we don't really want to spend a lot of time on it because we're really excited about the new website. But there's a lot of information there. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
I think we're going to open to Q&A if anyone has a question.
I'll just Good evening. My name is Kevin Wilkins. I work with a joint venture called Grow Cocoa, Sustainability and Livelihoods Programs in West Africa and Southeast Asia. First, thanks so much for coming out, and thank you so much for hosting the event. Fascinating work, what you're doing across different value chains and really identifying those that represent promise and have a proven track record of success, and identifying those to kind of move forward and providing them with the next steps to move forward. But question is to understand whether or not you have aspirations to move beyond Latin America. And then two, given the interest and focus on women and gender, are you having conversations or starting to develop relationships with folks like We Connect that ultimately go in and certify, just as though a fair trade or a Rainforest Alliance certify for different standards? We Connect will work with a 51% or more female-run company, certify them, and then build them into different value chains. So I'm curious as to whether or not you have those relationships, you're building them, and if you'll start to work outside of Latin America.
Yeah, so we have a lot of those relationships. We have a great partnership with We Connect, and we're building them. I mean, our name, Agora means marketplace. And in ancient Greece, in Athens, the Agora was where people came together. The first kind of free people ever came together to figure out how to get stuff done and how to, exchange goods, services, how to vote. All that stuff was in the Agora. And so that's a real metaphor for us about bringing different stakeholders together. And then partnerships is critical. We can't scale. We can't really do anything if we don't have great partnerships. So one of our core kind of success factors is how good of a partner are we? And one of my kind of things that I always try to tell funders is, you should actually encourage people to be good partners, and you should assess that, because it's really critical in this space that people are working together. We don't have plans right now to move beyond Latin America. I would say, though, that we're sort of focused, like I said, on getting this model right. But when we get it right, we're going to be insanely aggressive about scaling. But it's not perfect yet, and we still have a little bit more to do. So hopefully one day, but right now we're just focused on our core work in Latin America.
Questions? Sure.
Hi, Ben. Ann Evans from Ashoka. Good to see you again. I wanted to ask, what do you think the prime things are that are standing in the way between the impact investing market really taking off?
Well, it's a complicated question. I think that the number one thing is probably just awareness and culture. So why are banks talking about impact investing? They're talking about it because their clients are talking about it. And they're trying to figure out how they can insert this into their product mix to their clients. And that's why the banks are talking about impact investing as an asset class. If someone is saying it's an asset class, they're probably an asset manager. Now, there's a whole other group of people that are saying, no, it's not an asset class. It's a philosophy. It's a way of thinking about the role of capital in society. And that group of people, of which I guess I would consider myself one, is a little bit more kind of radical, and is saying we really have to change. Like, we have to upgrade our systems across the board, and how we think about investment, how we think about running a business, how we think about our consumption. These are all areas where we have to question our assumptions and evolve, essentially. And so I think that ultimately impact investing is going to really take off when entrepreneurs actually internalize it. And entrepreneurs say, this is the kind of company that I want to create. I don't think it's going to come from investors. I think investors are playing a very important role, especially high net worth investors who are on the lead on this. But when middle class impact investors can invest in middle class impact entrepreneurs, then you have a totally different world than the one that we have today. So I'm following crowdfunding. I think that's super exciting. But I always say that, we are competing to get the best entrepreneurs in Latin America to want to join an accelerator that is based on core values and that really, really takes impact seriously. And I think that we can do that. I think we can do that, but we have to be honest and upfront and not hide, and also say that just because you're focused on impact doesn't mean you're consigning yourself to the poorhouse either, at all. And so, I think that there's a lot of grassroots work that is going on, but I also think, standards. I mean, there's a lot of blocking and tackling that has to happen, and there's the impact in the U.S. has an impact investing task force. They're doing great work. They have all these policy recommendations. Ultimately, government is going to play a huge role in kind of scaling this. But I think that, especially like the millennial generation, who is this is just in their blood, it seems. And that's like so powerful and exciting to witness. But I think ultimately it's going to be the individual entrepreneurs saying, I want to create a great company. I want to achieve greatness. And I can't achieve greatness if I'm not taking into account everyone that I affect. And once that is the norm, then you're going to see, that's when you know that it's really arrived.
And I think it's time to enjoy happy hour. Thanks, guys, for coming. I thought it was really interesting. I learned a lot, even though I read a lot before you guys came. And for everyone who came, thanks for coming. You already made it, and I think you should get a glass of wine or beer. And I always advise, if you make it to events, try to meet at least 2-3 new people that you've never met before. That's how you build a community and your network. So look around, see who looks nice. If no one looks nice, I'm Vera. I'm very nice, even though I'm Russian. So please enjoy happy hour. Thanks, everyone, for coming.